In Rome, we make polenta with pork ribs. In this lesson, we will make a polenta arancino with a pork rib ragu. Once slow cooked, we'll debone the ribs, shred the meat, and then use it as a filling for a large polenta patty seasoned with butter and Parmesan, which will then be breaded and fried. Absolutely delicious. The first step for our arancino filling is an excellent rib ragu. We're going to prepare it with seed oil, celery, carrot, and onion, along with tomato paste, some meat broth, vegetable broth works just as well, and our delicious pork ribs. We're going to use seed oil. Why seed oil and not olive oil? Because we're going to use a very high temperature to allow our meat to develop a truly wonderfully inviting crispy crust. Remember, don't boil the meat when making meat sauces. The other ingredients are some flour, which we'll mix with water to create a batter for breading our arancini, and then breadcrumbs, which we'll specifically need to achieve that perfectly golden brown fried finish. Then we have our polenta flour. I'm using the pre-cooked kind. You can use it, it's not forbidden, but if you're a purist, use the traditional kind. The only source of gluten in this recipe is the breadcrumbs for the coating. Use polenta flour to coat your arancini, and you'll have a completely gluten-free arancino. Let's start with the ragu. So, seed oil in a saucepan. Let's grab our ribs. We're not starting with the sofrito base like we usually do, because we want the meat to get nicely browned, and at that temperature, our vegetables would burn. So, we'll start with the meat. And we'll let it brown well on both sides, ensuring a good crust forms. We'll sear them well on both sides and then continue with our recipe. So, how can I tell when my meat is ready to be flipped over? When it effortlessly detaches from the pan's bottom. This delectable crispy crust is the Maillard reaction, the meat's sugars caramelizing beautifully. That's what will give the flavor to our ragu. So remember, the meat must have a crispy crust. And this is always true when you're making stews, bolognese sauce, or braised meats. Remember, always get a nice crispy crust first. Once the meat is seared on both sides, I'll transfer it to a sheet pan, and then we can proceed with our ragu. In a separate saucepan, we'll start preparing our sofrito. Now for the ragu. Clean saucepan. A drizzle of olive oil, but not too much. The ribs have plenty of fat, which they'll render during the slow, long cooking. Celery, carrot, and onion, the base of every Italian dish. Remember, they need to sweat and slowly break down. We must not burn the onion. How do we help them release their juices? We'll add a little salt directly to the sofrito. This way, the onion will release its water and stew in its own liquid. Let them cook slowly until they are translucent. Our sofrito is translucent. Now, let's continue with the preparation of our pork rib ragu. We'll return the ribs to the saucepan. Tomato paste. This is double, but regular tomato paste works just fine. And then our broth. Cover the pork ribs just to the top. Now we'll put the lid on and let it gently simmer on low heat for at least 2 hours, or until we observe the meat easily falling off the bone. Ragu's almost done. Time to prep the polenta. We'll use the polenta while it's still warm to properly form our polenta arancino. If we were to use it cold, like you would with rice for a traditional arancino, the polenta wouldn't stick together. So we have boiling salted water and our instant polenta flour all prepped and ready to go. We'll continue stirring until it's thickened up nicely. Then we'll cream it well with some butter and Parmesan cheese. polenta is creamed, so let's set it aside. Now, let's debone the pork ribs. And please, don't put it in the fridge because we'll need it warm. It's been about a couple of hours. The meat is incredibly tender. It's falling off the bone. I'd say we can debone the pork ribs now. So let's start by taking our meat out. As you can see, they come right out. This meat here, we're going to shred it, and it will serve as our delicious filling. Now I'm going to shred the pork ribs I need for the filling. When shredding the pork ribs, be sure to remove the membrane that connected the bone to the meat. Otherwise, you might find it right in the center of our delicious polenta arancini. Let's continue to shred all of our meat using 2 forks, shall we? Then we'll mix it with a little bit of the sauce. And please, don't throw away the leftover sauce. You can either dip the arancini in it or make pasta with it the next day. As I shred the meat and meticulously remove any significant pieces of membrane or excess fat, the meat is already beginning to achieve the ideal temperature, perfect for incorporating into our arancini. Have you noticed I haven't added any salt? For dishes that require long cooking times, I prefer adding salt at the very end, once the sauce has achieved its ideal consistency. Why do I prefer doing it this way? Because reducing the sauce would risk making it overly salty. By adding it in at the very end, I can perfectly adjust the seasoning. The meat from the pork ribs is deboned, so we'll add a few spoonfuls of sauce to give it a creamier texture, making our filling incredibly flavorful and rich. And then we'll start assembling our polenta arancini. I'm going to assemble them in a slightly different way than you typically would for rice arancini. We'll be working with a small bowl and some plastic wrap, and we're going to create a kind of little dumpling. So we'll begin by lining our bowl with a food-safe plastic film, making sure it's snug and ready. After that, I have a small bowl of water here. I'll start by taking my polenta. I'll gently drop it right into the bowl. So, using the back of a wet spoon, I'm going to start shaping my polenta and making a pocket where I will carefully place my delicious filling. Remember, when creating the hollow for your filling, don't dig too deeply, or there's a risk of it breaking open during the cooking process. Now, let's fill it with our shredded meat and some more polenta. And now we close up our little bundle. Working with it while it's still warm will ensure a perfectly tight seal. Twist. And we'll place it on a tray. Now, these absolutely need to rest. So once we've assembled all of them, we'll let them cool down in the refrigerator for at least a couple of hours. Our polenta arancino have rested, and they're nice and cold. Let's move on to the batter, the breading, and then we'll fry them. I'm going to make a traditional batter for arancini, so just flour and water. You can easily use beaten eggs instead. So I'm going to combine the water with the flour until I get a pretty fluid batter, into which I will then dip my polenta arancino. Let's add some more water because the batter needs to be quite runny. There, this is the consistency. Our batter should be fluid, not too thick. Otherwise, we'll end up with a crust that's too hard around our polenta arancino. We'll use 2 forks to dip the very first polenta arancino. We coat it thoroughly, lift it up, and then place it onto a baking sheet where I've already spread out some breadcrumbs. Shake the tray a bit and completely cover our polenta arancino with breadcrumbs. And on to the next ones. Ready to fry? Oil's hot at 180 degrees. How do I know? I can either measure it with a thermometer, or I can drop in a tiny bit of breading and see if it bubbles. Alternatively, I insert a skewer, and when I see oil bubbles form around it, I know it's ready. My advice is to place them on a spider strainer and then into the oil, because they're quite heavy and we risk splashing ourselves. So into the hot oil we go. And let them cook for approximately 4 to 5 minutes, or until they're golden brown. 4 minutes have passed, and our fried treats are now perfectly golden brown. Let's drain them, and then we'll get them beautifully plated. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to blend some of the sauce and use it to garnish my arancini. Let's place them on some paper for fried foods. The arancini are fried and they look absolutely amazing. I'll demonstrate a more appealing way to plate them, or you can simply enjoy them as they are, just like authentic street food. Let's put them on a plate. Here I have the cooking liquid, our pork rib sauce, which I've blended to make it smooth. We'll drizzle a couple of spoonfuls of the sauce over our delicious polenta arancino, pecorino, and a grind of fresh pepper. But now, let me show you the inside of the arancino. Here is our polenta arancino filled with pork rib ragu. It's so good, with a melty filling and super crispy polenta. This dish concludes our culinary journey exploring pork and the cured meats that come from it. I truly hope you've enjoyed them as much as I did, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you.